Rassie has a big problem for the Springbok 8th man position, and that problem is that there's too many guys to choose from. There's probably 6 to 9 guys that could fill in that number 8 jersey. I'm going to break down every single player that is a possibility and how I see Rassie Erasmus managing this problem throughout the season. If you haven't, please hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about the Springboks South African rugby, so if that's something you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button because we're on our way to 100,000 subscribers. Leave this video a like, and as always, drop your opinions down in the comments. Let's get into it. Now, the way I've broken this down is that there are 9 possibilities that could be playing in that 8 jersey for the Springboks this year. Some players that got picked for the second alignment camp and others that didn't. Now, I'm going to start with the 4 players that didn't get picked for the second alignment camp, and there's various reasons why they didn't get picked. I think before starting off with these players, it is important to say that this second alignment camp isn't the final squad that the Springboks are going to go into 2025 with. I think Rassie Erasmus is going to experiment with a lot of different players this season, which is why we have a Barbarians game, which is why I think we have 2 games against Italy and a game against Georgia, which is probably why we'll have a game against Japan somewhere along the line this year. So don't take it as these players that have made the second alignment camp are definitely the final cut players. Guys like Rous definitely still have a chance of getting into the Springbok squad. Now, speaking of Rous, he didn't make that second alignment camp, and a lot of people's eyebrows were raised because of that, because he's had such a good season for the Stormers. We've kind of been asking a lot from Rous in the last couple of seasons. He's been on the fringe of making that Springbok squad for many, many years, but it was first an aggression problem or a discipline problem on the field. Now he's playing some outstanding rugby, and you kind of have to feel bad for the guy that he didn't get picked for that second alignment camp. But like I say, I don't think that is the squad. I definitely do think Rous is going to get a run in a Springbok jersey at some point this season. I mean, he has 7 caps for the Springboks. He's only 25 years of age, and I think a question we do have to ask is this Rassie's plan? Does he want Rous hungry for when that Springbok season comes around? Does he want him to go prove himself even more so in the quarterfinals of the URC, of the semifinals, potentially even the final of the URC? I definitely think we will see Rous this year. Now, moving on to the next option. 2 guys who did not make the second alignment camp, Phepsi Buthelezi and Mpilo Gumede. Now, I'm going to start with Gumede just because I think it's a bit more of a clear-cut decision. Him and Cameron Hanak both play for the Blue Bulls, which, I mean, if you can kind of see why Cameron Hanak is probably a step above Mpilo Gumede at the moment. He's just had 2 phenomenal seasons for the Blue Bulls, and he's definitely going to be one of those guys who's going to get a couple of caps for the Springboks this season. Now, Mpilo Gumede did make the first alignment camp, and he kind of shot onto the scene about a year ago for the Blue Bulls. He's a very, very good 8th man, but I think he just needs a couple more years to develop. He's also only 24, 25, so still a couple of years to develop. The other guy is Phepsi Buthelezi, who's been playing for the Sharks. Now, Phepsi has 1 cap for the Springboks. He played against Portugal last year, but for me, he doesn't really have the mold of a Springbok 8. I would rather see him on the side of the scrum, maybe a 6 or a 7, and we can kind of see the Sharks shifting him around between 6, 7, and 8. So I'm not too sure if he is going to be playing that number 8 position for the Springboks, or if they would prefer him on the side of the scrums. But you can definitely see maybe him in the conversation in the next year or so. I think he still has a little bit of development to go through. And then the final player who didn't make the second alignment camp, and that's because of injury, is Alrich Lo. Now, last year, Alrich Lo and Jasper Visser were kind of our go-to 8th men for the Springboks. Alrich Lo had a phenomenal season for the Springboks last year and unfortunately got injured. He's probably going to be out for the majority of the season, which is a massive loss. But if he can get back from injury and be an option in 2026 leading into that 2027 Rugby World Cup, then we're going to have an even bigger headache on our hands, because then we could have Alrich Lo, Jasper Visser, Kwagga Smith, Cameron Hanak, and these younger guys like Rous, Phepsi Buthelezi, and Mpilo Gumede sort of coming through the ranks. So it's definitely not a bad thing to have depth. It is just some of these guys are not going to play for the Springboks, and that's just the way it's going to be because of the competition. So they're going to have to really outperform the other guys and really put their hand up. Now, if we move into the guys who made the alignment camp that can play in that 8 jersey, we've got Cameron Hanak, we've got Kolisi, Jasper Visser, Joarno Augustus, Jean-Luc Dupria, and Kwagga Smith. Now, I think let's start with Cameron Hanak, because I think he's probably going to win player of the season in the URC. He got his first Springbok cap for the Springboks last year, but he's sort of one of those players that you feel like he's been around for a bit longer than 1 cap, which maybe paints a picture of how good he really is, because I mean, he deserves a whole lot more Springbok caps. Cameron Hanekom is a freak of nature. He's such a good athlete, and maybe not the traditional mold of a Springbok number 8 like a Piers Spies or a Dwayne Vermeulen, those big ball carriers, but he gets around the park, he makes steals, he puts in some massive tackles, and he's super agile in that number 8 position. Maybe it gives us a little bit of a different option in that 8 jersey to what Jasper Visser does for the Springboks. So I think Cameron Hanekom is going to play a lot of rugby this year for the Springboks. I think they're going to test him, they're going to throw him into the deep water and see if he swims. I think he deserves it, and I think he's definitely one of those guys that we can look towards the 2027 Rugby World Cup and almost build a team around him if he performs in 2025 and 2026. Next is Kolisi. Now, Sia traditionally plays in that number 6 jersey for the Springboks, but he has been playing 8 for the Sharks, and I think him getting a little bit older, moving him to 8 is not a bad decision, because the flanks definitely do the most work on the field, them and maybe the centers in a rugby game, where the 8 does slightly less work. He can focus more on carrying the ball, making big hits, turning over vital balls, not going into every ruck. So maybe saving his gas tank a bit by moving him to 8 is a clever decision. But for me, I would rather have Sia at 6. You can have like a Peter Steph Toy at 7, and then you can pick your 8 man. I think putting Sia into that 8th man position is just going to make it a whole lot more complicated for Cameron Hanekom, for a Jasper Visser, for a Gerardo Augustus. In saying that, Cameron Hanekom could also play 6. So there's that option as well. Then you got Gerardo Augustus, who has been called up to the alignment camp, deservedly so. A lot of people have been asking where he's been for the last couple of years. He's had some outstanding seasons for Northampton Saints. They're not playing this weekend in the Champions Cup. So he's no stranger to the big stage. He's been putting in a lot of very good performances. He played junior Springboks, and I think it's about time that he gets an opportunity. Now, again, being in the alignment camp doesn't mean you're going to make the Springbok squad, but he is more of that mold of a Springbok 8. He's massive. He's a big ball carrier, great on defense, and he is that enforcer on the field. So it's going to be interesting to see where he fits in, but I wouldn't be surprised if he plays against the likes of the Barbarians in Italy or Georgia, just to see what he's about. Then we've obviously got Jasper Visser, who has probably been our go-to 8th man since the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Jasper Visser, I mean, we don't see too much of him these days because he plays over in Japan, but he's still in the squad for a reason. We know what we're going to get from Jasper Visser. He is that mold of a Springbok number 8, a very good ball carrier, very physical, and very reliable in that position. He doesn't often have a bad game. He's very consistent. Then our last 2, Kwagga Smith, I mean, we know what we're going to get from him. He's more of an impact player for me, coming off of the bench, can play 6, can play 7, can play 8, can play center, he can play around the park. So I think starting Kwagga at 8 is almost disabling the Springboks game plan just a little bit, because we do have better options in Jasper Visser, in Cameron Hanekom, that could start in that number 8 jersey. And then finally, we got Jean-Luc du Preez, who does have 14 caps for the Springboks. And we know Rassie Rasmus loves a versatile player, someone that can play in different positions. And that's what Jean-Luc du Preez offers. I mean, he can play lock, he can play 6, he can play 7, he can play 8. I looked at some of his stats, and his positioning is almost split 25% across lock, flank, and 8th man. So it's a very interesting call. He has played for the Springboks. He's been tearing it up for the Sale Sharks. But again, where does he fit in? Is he better than Cameron Hanekom, Jasper Visser, Sia Kolisi, Gerardo Augustus, Kwagga Smith? I mean, the depth is just undeniable at the moment. So for me at the moment, I think our young buck, Cameron Hanekom, coming through, needs to get 5 to 8 test caps for the Springboks this year. We really need to get him some experience in that Springbok jersey before the 2027 Rugby World Cup. I would say Jasper Visser still has a good couple of years. Gerardo Augustus definitely deserves a go. I wouldn't be surprised if they put Jean-Luc du Preez on the bench as sort of that utility forward, and then we know what we get from Kwagga Smith, and Sia will probably end up on the side of the scrum. Let me know what you guys think. Drop your opinions down in the comments. Hit that subscribe button. Leave this video a like. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.